Hi, I'm from Channel 10. We're just getting some shots of everyone. Do you mind working for your film? No, great. You look just like Ginger Meggs, so I'm hoping we can get a shot of you later on with the film.
Good afternoon. That works. Amazing. Hi everyone. Welcome to the Australian Consulate-General. I reckon I am almost certainly right in saying there has never been a cartoonist event at the Consulate-General. Anyway, there certainly hasn't been a Ginger Meggs event at the Consulate-General. So that when Jason approached us, we're really just providing the venue. We're not doing more than that. But our job is to support Australians, whether they're running businesses, big or small, or running coffee shops, or being artists of all sorts, visual, performing artists. Our job is obviously to support the Australian community and those associated with them. So when Jason approached us, and he'll tell you that originally this event, which is the 100 years birthday of Ginger Meggs, it was going to be in Australia, which is obviously Ginger Meggs' home, and it was going to be bigger than Ben-Hur. Well, the world changed and COVID came and all those sort of things, so it's not bigger than Ben-Hur, but it's in New York, and we're very pleased to be able to have you here and be the venue for some of the cartoonist community and some of the Australian women in New York and some of the Australian children in New York to come along and to be part of it. The only other thing I want to say is that when I was talking to some of the cartoonists, one of them, he'll be nameless, I'll find him though, he said, well, you can tell we're all cartoonists, we actually don't have a job. And I said, that's really good because people ask me what the Consul-General does. And I say he doesn't have a job. So I might become a member of the, let me in. So look, I want to welcome all of you. I want to welcome Jason and Ronnie. It is an important sort of cultural thing for Australia. Ginger Meggs is the quintessential cartoon character in Australian history. I suspect he's the only one who's reached the age of 100, and in that time he's survived about 6 Jasons, and will probably survive a few more in time to come. So it's an important part of sort of Australian cultural history, and we're glad that you're a small part of celebrating the 100 years. So welcome, and over to Jason.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you to the Consulate-General for hosting this. As Nick mentioned, this was going to be something we were going to be doing down under, but it all fell apart very rapidly. But it actually makes more sense that it's here, because this is where Ginger Meggs has been syndicated from since 2000. And it's where I've been drawing him for the past 7 years. So I think it's appropriate that it's here at the Australian Consulate-General in New York that we're doing this. You might have mentioned, you might have noticed my dear friend here, Ronny Chieng. I'll give it up for Ronny. We muted his mic because I don't want him to upstage me. But Ronny and I are going to be having a quick chat about Ginger Meggs and about the 100th. Is that working?
Working now.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Have you used a microphone before?
I guess this is how you hold it. Alright.
But I wanted to give anyone who's not familiar with Ginger Meggs, and I know there's a few, I made this back in 2011, which is why it says 90 years young. And it's a very, very brief 30-second primer. It was meant to be funny, but I don't know. It's basically, I'm going to show you, this is a brief history of Ginger Meggs. I'm going to play this and then we'll have a quick chat. So here we go. Here goes nothing.
This is the story of Ginger Meggs, the longest-running comic strip in Australian history ever. Created in 1921 by Sydney cartoonist Jimmy Meggs, the Australian Prime Minister said, Ginger Meggs is Australia's Peter Pan, but unlike him, we had to grow up. Good one, PM. Ginger Meggs became ubiquitous with being an Australian. He literally invented the word ochre. Literally. In World War II, the Air Force used to draw Ginger Meggs on the side of their bombers and the bombs that they would drop from their bombers. In fact, when they hit their target, they could be heard gleefully screaming over the radio, "That guy just got a Meggsing." Eventually, Ginger Meggs got his own matches, Australian dollar coin, his own postage stamp. He got a park named after him in Sydney. He got his own stage musical on the stage. He got a movie made in 1983 starring Gary McDonald. He even got his very own pot plant. Amazing. In 1952, when Jimmy Meggs died, he said, "Creators come and go. I hope the character I've created in Ginger Meggs will live long beyond me." So when he died, Ron Vivian took over from him. And then when he died, Lloyd Piper took over from him. Then when he died, James Kemsley took over from him. Then this guy took over.
So that's the history of Ginger Meggs to this day. And so it was. We don't need it. We're good. It's okay. So basically, we had to sort of figure out because today, the 13th of November was the very first. Well, it was the very first appearance of Ginger Meggs, but he wasn't Ginger Meggs back then. He was Ginger Smith. He was a supporting character in someone else's strip. But I thought, instead of me just giving you the Wikipedia entry of Ginger Meggs, it might be nice to just have a chat about it with Ronnie, and I can share some stories and information.
It's my honor. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it feels like, no, it's okay, don't have to clap. It's totally. It feels like we're about this is the most formal setting I've ever spoken to you in. There's like flags around. I feel like we're going to sign a bilateral agreement.
Wait, did you not get the draft? I sent you a bilateral.
I can't even see you between these flowers. It's like
King Protea, I'll have you know.
Okay.
This is the opposite of between two ferns. Comedians between one fern.
Between one. This is native Australian.
It is.
Cool.
It is.
How do you guys get this in America? Are these fake? They're real?
They're real.
Fluid in what are the food miles on this? That's really bad. Cool.
Was that right? Is it a King Protea?
I think so.
It is, I think it's in the eucalyptus family. Anyway.
Oh yeah, there's kids in the audience. This is Australia's native foliage.
This is what we eat.
In Australia. Okay, well, thanks for having me talk to you.
Sure.
I just want to, I mean, you've been drawing on Ginger Meggs since 2007 now.
I have.
About 14 years.
2007, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, if we can bring it back to the beginning a bit, like, what did Ginger Meggs mean to you before you started working on it?
It was kind of like, you know when you see a TV show and you're like, oh, that's my show, or like you read a book and you're like, I want to read everything that author's ever written. It was like that because all of the comic strips that existed at the time were Garfield, and they were Calvin and Hobbes, and all these American strips, and none of them made any, like they made some sense, and then, but there was no context. It was all just like, this could be in anywhere, it could be in Springfield. So Ginger Meggs was the only comic that was set in Australia. And that I as a kid, like I used to do the same thing. I used to ride around, when I wasn't drawing, I'd ride around the neighborhood on my bike and get into trouble. It was almost like a cheat sheet. I was like, all right, what should I do next? But like, it was one of the only things that made
you took
it.
Ginger Meggs comics as in like
Yeah.
what to do that day?
Pretty much. Yeah, like what should I do to get in trouble today?
Yeah.
But it was strange. Like Australia, I don't think it's known that like most of Australian comic strips in newspapers are American. So it was the only Aussie strip. So immediately I just like gobbled it up, and it was the first book I ever read. It was the Ginger Meggs collection, and yeah, it meant a lot to me. I identified it well with it very young.
I mean, was it something that got you started in illustrating or on the path of illustrating?
I think Mad Magazine got me more into that. I used to shout out Mad Magazine.
Who's in the house right now?
Yeah, yep. Sam Viviano, hi Sam. Yeah, it was one of those things that like I was obsessed with. I wonder if I could ever do that. Probably not. I didn't think I could ever do that.
Well, yeah. how then? I mean, could you explain a little bit about how you got started
Sure.
with Ginger Meggs?
Well, so I was doing cartoons in Perth, like editorial, political, topical cartoons, and I had to turn those around pretty fast. And so I would pull these ridiculous shifts at the newspaper, and I would take any work that I could as long as it was cartooning, like caricatures and illustrations and stuff. And so it's like anything you do, the more you do it, the better you get. So I just kept doing it, and then the way that I came to be doing Ginger Meggs is that the president of the Australian Cartoonists Association, which had been going at that point since 1924, he kind of started mentoring me, and he was teaching me as a kid. I was like in my 20s. He was teaching me how to be a cartoonist and teaching me all that stuff. So, long story short, if you can learn from someone who's already doing it, you'll learn way quicker. So that's what it was I started seeking out other cartoonists to ask them how they did it, and then I would do that.
And I mean, this is probably difficult for you to answer as someone who's relatively modest, but like, were you the obvious?
By the way, thanks. That's very nice.
I'm trying to make it look good in front of channel 10 or 9 or whichever that one is. ABC. Like, would you say, this is tough for you to answer, but would you say you were the obvious choice to do it? Who did you beat out, basically?
See, that's the thing, there was no obvious choice. When it was kind of a tragic, sad story. The cartoonist who was doing it, the president of the Australian Cartoonists Association, his name was James Kemsley. He also happened to be the cartoonist for Ginger Meggs. He was in Sydney, it was in Bowral in New South Wales, and I was in Perth, and I was doing editorial cartoons, he was doing comic strips, and there was so many other cartoonists who I just would have assumed that would have done it, and it turns out, as I later found out, he had gone to them to ask them, hey, who do you think? And they agreed me, which is ridiculous because I didn't even know they knew who I was, let alone that I was appropriate for this job. There was no heir apparent because we thought he'd be doing it forever. Kemsley was this like immortal character.
So you're too modest to say, but you were the consensus #1 draft.
It surprised the hell out of me because I was, like I said, I was 23 in Perth.
Right.
You know.
And when he asked you to do it, was it a no-brainer for you, or were you like, of course you do it, or were you hesitant to take on the mantle, or?
There wasn't a big learning curve in the writing in that I was already a huge fan of the strip, so I knew that all the characters, I knew the backstory, I knew how the strip was drawn because I could draw like him. In fact, Kemsley put out a how to draw book in the 80s and 90s, like 2 of them.
So anyone can do this?
Yeah, so anyone can really take this over from me.
Right.
But I learned to draw a lot of, like I was copying out of his how to draw books as well as like Mad and, you know, New Yorker and stuff. So, it became like, I was hoping that he would coach me to take it over. I thought we had months left of him being alive to coach me, but it turns out it was a very Miyagi-esque thing where he'd been teaching me all along how to do this, and I didn't know until I started doing it. Oh, this is what he was trying to tell me. So yeah, I took it over. It was a big learning curve, but I honestly, I think I've figured it out by now. I'm still working on it.
Right. I'm trying to keep this on Ginger Meggs and not so much about you, but
yeah,
it's obviously, there is no Ginger Meggs without you right now. So
sure.
I mean, I guess my question is like, how? I mean, what would you do for? Right now, we're kind of seeing this trend in media, where things are kind of moving away from paper and and so you've kind of not only had to take on drawing and writing responsibilities, you kind of had to take on this like business role to kind of keep this thing going.
Totally.
So can you talk a little bit about? Can you talk a little bit about the commercial kind of the modern commercial realities of doing this comic, or how you're modernizing the strip, or challenges?
Well, that's what the kids are here to learn. So I'll tell you the business of syndication. No, it is so you're right in that when I was growing up, when I was this young fella's age, I was the kid who would run into his parents' bedroom on Sunday morning, I'd grab the comic section of the newspaper and I'd steal it and read it. And that was how I got my comics. That's how I got my fix of like cartoons and the funnies, right? And now kids can pretty much pull them up on their phone or their iPad or anything at any time of day at will. And it's a really interesting new dynamic because not only can they get the entire back catalogue, so instead of like, you used to have to wait every week to get a new strip, like to get a new installment. And now, if you see one, you can read every single one ever made now. You can see the entire back catalogue. So with that in mind, it has been, I'm the first cartoonist who really had to deal with what the internet is for comic artists. I'm close friends with a lot of comic artists who are doing really well on that because we're all trying to figure it out and pretend we know what we're doing. So you can read Ginger Meggs every day on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on his website, on his blog. There's so many ways to read him now, not just in paper, but the business aspect is that it does have to evolve to different mediums. So yeah, we're working on, the original creators family and myself are working on evolving him into different media.
And do you, I mean, again, you're too modest to say this, but this is a real kind of labor of love for you. This comic strip. I've seen you over the last decade since I've known you in Melbourne, kind of work on this thing. You know, even despite, I mean, I don't know if people know this. This isn't his only job. Again, I mean, Australia kind of owes you a bit of a debt, keeping this thing going on your own. So 3 cheers to you. No one in the room seems to agree, but whatever. You know, I still love you today. Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, you never say this yourself, but I just want to know, like, if you could ask Australia to kind of do one thing to kind of help with, you know, with this piece of cultural heritage, like, what would you ask Australians to do other than straight up give you cash money?
I mean, straight up cash money is option A, would be really awesome. Here's the thing, and this isn't a, you know, a particularly nice aspect of being an artist in Australia, but it's the reason that I live in New York is that I hit a ceiling as an artist in Australia. I really wish that there were more opportunities for artists to make a living.
Channel 10, let's keep it rolling. This is for the people.
But since the early days of newspapers starting to think that they could cut costs by dropping the comics section and then being mystified where their readers were going, it's always been this thing where the most talented, and I say this, I'm not blowing smoke, the most talented cartoonists that I still to this day have seen all came out of New Zealand and Australia. They are so committed to their craft, they're so talented, and they have nowhere to showcase it. Even if they put it online, they get a much smaller audience because just by virtue of where they are and the media that they have available to them. Australia is this wonderful country that I love very, very much, but I wish there were more opportunities, especially for young artists, to find a foothold and actually be able to share their work. And so that's always been a big part of trying to keep Ginger Meggs alive, is trying to make sure that I'm able to do him justice and keep him alive. And we've never talked about this before, but that's a big part of why I'm here.
Sure.
Yeah, it's because the opportunities for cartoonists in Australia dried up very rapidly.
No, I mean, I know how much you worked on this, and I know how much you effort you put into this. That's what I was trying to get out there for you, but you just made a real downer for everybody. I was hoping you would let me take the bullet for that, but no, I do see it as a, you know, fellow struggling artist. But you know what? It is cool. We're here in New York City.
Yeah.
You know, people showed up for your.
This is amazing.
For your piece of work. Yeah, the kids showed up. I don't want to bore them anymore with this adult talk. This guy's getting angry about a minute. And I think there's a reading coming up. Right?
There is. We're going to do a quick reading and part of the one of the chapters of the new book that just came out.
Okay. Well, Jason, thank you so much for continuing to create Ginger Meggs.
Thank you.
It takes a very talented person to keep it going. Like I said, you need to be a world-class artist, a world-class comic writer, and you need to have a business mind, and you need to have the passion for it. So I think the comic strip and the country is very lucky that they found you to keep this going. So thanks again, Jason.
Thank
a lot.
you, Ronny. That's very nice. Thank you, everyone.
Who got an invoice for this? Invoice you or
Just send it to the consulate.
Okay.
They'll pay you in rubles.
By the way, thank you Consulate as well for being in New York. It's very convenient. If you guys ever need to photocopy something here, buy A4 paper on Amazon and bring it here. Because for some reason, banks in Australia do not accept letter size, US letter size paper, and they cause a big fuss, and you end up FedExing things back and forth. So just buy A4 paper on Amazon before you come here to verify any documents. Okay?
It's the most specific
I know, it's a
advice.
very specific. I want to take away from Ginger Meggs.
Thank you, Ronny Chieng, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Ronny. Good man, thank you. Great socks too. You can get these socks from ronnychieng.com. I thought what might be fun is something that I worked on very hard. I've never done a book before in my life, and we were very, very lucky that the great-great-grandnephew of the creator of Ginger Meggs, Tristan Banks, he's a celebrated Australian author, and so he came to us about 5 years ago and said, would you consider doing a book of Ginger Meggs? And we were like, I mean, if you write it, sure. But they said, yeah, but you've got to illustrate it. And then I was like, yeah, that sounds like fun. And then after saying yes, realized just how much work illustrating a book is. And so it took a very long time to do. But we're very proud of how it came out. So it was released as part of the 100th anniversary of Ginger Meggs, and Australia Post put out a very special edition along with the stamps that were put out with Ginger Meggs on them, and the Royal Australian Mint put out this series of coins in everyone wants to say that again. Yeah. Let's get the kids to the front for the reading. I'm going to show, on the screen I'm going to show, and this is going to be just as fun for the adults in the room as well, I promise.
Just so that we've got them actually.
Hello, what's your name? Leo. Hi, I'm Jason. What's your name? Archie. Take a seat, Archie. And gentleman in the white shirt, feel free to come and sit on the ground. What's your name? Charlie. What a brilliant name. All right. Take a seat. Very nice. All right. Now, I'm going to read from the book. This is a chapter from a story in the book called Dead Man's Hill. Now, does anyone know what a billy cart is? Or a radio flyer, a box car? They're a little cart. It's a little cart that looks like this. And kids used to, so here's what happened. Kids used to make their own billy carts and run them down hills to great peril. And then they stopped doing it for a while, and for some reason they've started doing it again. So in Australia, there's billy cart races all over the place, and they race these things down hills. It's a suicide mission, but it's a very big part of Ginger Meggs' history. So he always, if you look at all the old comic strips over there, he's always running a billy cart down Dead Man's Hill, and it's called Dead Man's Hill for a reason. So this is a story. That Tristan Banks wrote that I'm going to read some of. I won't read the whole chapter, but we're gonna have a little read, and then you can continue reading. I've got some books for you all to take home after this. All right. Ginger and Benny scream down the hill. Ginger squints against the wind, and Benny's ears flick and flap in the air. The squeaky wheels on their billy cart turn so fast on the dirt track that they could melt at any moment. It's the fastest the two best mates have ever been. The fastest anyone's ever been. Probably. Ginger grips the rope tight. He can feel Benny in the back seat gripping him tight. Their knuckles are white, but they're doing it. They're really doing it. Coogan's not the only one who can survive Dead Man's Hill, Ginger calls to Benny. Eddie Coogan, the sneakiest, cunningest, possibly richest kid in town. He said he rode down all the way down Dead Man's Hill last Sunday, but he had no proof. So Ginger and Benny built their own billy cart out of stuff from Ginger's backyard. The frame is made out of recycled wood from his dog's kennel. The back wheels borrowed from his little brother Dudley's pram. The steering rope is from Mum's clothesline, and the front wheels are from the wheelie bin, which Ginger can't imagine Dad being too happy about. But here they are, speeding towards their destiny as local celebrities. Ginger can already imagine the look on Coogan's face when he hears the news. "You still filming?" he calls to Benny, his voice trembling from the rough, rocky hill. "Yep," Benny shouts into Ginger's ear. "Hey, Ginge!" "Yeah, Benny." "Pothole!" Ginger sees it just in time. He tugs the rope with his left hand and steers around the hole like an expert. Trees flick by and the car tips so far forward now it feels like they might flip. Dead Man's Hill's a bit like the Big Dip on a roller coaster, only it's bumpy, strewn with rocks, and has no safety features whatsoever. It's also 10 times longer. Ginger can see town way down the bottom. It's so far down. His head starts to spin. Sweat breaks out in little dots on his forehead and nose. "Hey, Ginge?" "Yeah?" "Can you see that front left wheel?" "Yep." "Looks kind of wobbly to you?" Ginger takes his eyes off the hill for a second and looks down. It does look kind of wobbly. "Yep, and is the cart shaking a bit?" Benny's right, the cart's trembling like it's almost as terrified as Ginger. Yeah?" Ginger calls, pulling the rope tighter with both hands to keep the cart moving in a straight line. "Hey, Ginge!" "What, Benny?" Ginger shouts over the terrible noise. "Did that wheel just come off?" Ginger checks. It's true, the wheel did just come off. They both scream and the axle, which used to be joined to the wheel, hits a rock and makes sparks shoot up like a firecracker. It grinds along the ground, hitting more rocks and sending fiery sparks all over the place. "Help!" Benny screams in Ginger's ear. "Ah!" Ginger shouts. His hands howl with rope burn as he tries to steer the cart, but it's no good. They're heading towards a long, narrow ditch on their left. "Bye!" Benny calls. Ginger feels Benny let go of him and hears a dull thud, a grassy scuffle, and an ow! Ginger and the billy cart fly into the ditch and land with a spectacular splash. Silence. Just the gentle sound of one wheel squeaking to a stop. And a kookaburra laughing in a nearby tree. You know what a kookaburra is? Ginger raises his head out of the ditch puddle and looks up at Benny, who's peering down at him. Benny's face is grazed. He has grass in his hair and his shirt has nearly been torn clean off. "Hey, Ginge?" "Yeah?" Ginger says, spitting out a mouthful of muddy water. "We're not even halfway down." "As if," Ginger says, standing up to peer out of the ditch. He looks up and down the hill. "I reckon we're even a quarter of the way down," Benny says. Ginger feels like crying. It's true. They haven't hit the steepest part of the hill yet. Something bumps Ginger's ankle. He looks down at his feet. It's a pram wheel floating in the dirty brown ditch water with other random bits of their cart. Ginger looks up at Benny, who's dusting off his cap. He's a skinny kid about the same height as Ginger on level ground. Benny's hair is plastered to his head with dirt and sweat. "You want to get hot chips?" Benny asks. "Plan our next attempt?" "What next attempt?" Ginger says, feeling pain in his ribs and arms and legs and toes and eyeballs. Benny offers him a hand out of the ditch and he takes it. There is no next attempt. As Ginger stands, a large shadow falls across the two boys. Ginger could swear the temperature dropped by a couple of degrees, and he can hear that kookaburra laughing again. Only this time it sounds less like a and more like "Get a load of this," says a familiar voice. "Me good mate Ginger can't steer a billy cart to save his life, Meggs." Ginger's head slowly turns. "Juggy is," Ginger says through gritted teeth. "How nice to see you." Juggy is Johnson, the only kid in Ginger's class who is meaner, nastier, and rottener than Eddie Coogan. Not to mention bigger. He's the biggest kid in the whole school. "Not going to let Eddie Coogan get one up on you, are you?" Juggy is asked. Ginger balls his fist. The thought of Coogan beating him at anything makes Ginger's hair turn even redder. "No," Ginger says. "This was just a test run." Benny looks surprised, but I thought you said good, Juggy says, because I have an opportunity for you. "What?" Ginger asks, knowing it'll be lame and shooting warning eyes at Benny to keep his trap shut. Sunday morning, the first ever Dead Man's Hill Billy Cart Championship. The promoter is me, the great Juggy Johnson. Everyone will be here. It's your chance to show Coogan what you're made of. The loser, if he's still alive at the bottom, will have to face the consequences. Ginger looks at Benny, knowing that those consequences will probably involve one of them upside down in a bin. Ginger hates it when Juggy puts him in the bin. The winner, Juggy goes on, avoids those consequences and wins $50. What do you say? The rest is history. Here we go. So I'll give you all a bit of a teaser of the rest of it. This is how the story goes. These are Ginger's new friends, by the way. I'll just quickly introduce you to them before we go. As you've just met Ginger and his best friend Benny. This is Gloria. She's a young Aboriginal girl who's just been introduced to the strip in previous years. This is Ronny Chieng, named after our good friend Ronnie, who actually helped develop Penny. Penny is a Malaysian Australian. This is Rahul Jayasinghe. He is a part Indian, part Sri Lankan Australian. He's a great cricket player who's been added to the slate in the past few years. This is Cuthbert Fitzcloon, Cuffy, Fitzy. We call him Fitzy in the strip. Cuthbert Fitzcloon's been around since the 1920s. He's the kind of nerd of the gang. He's the one I identify with a lot. And then, of course, Juggy Johnson and Eddie Coogan in their billy carts. The whole thing ends in disaster, of course, but you have to find out exactly how by reading the rest of the book. This rivalry goes back 100 years, and it continues to this very day. But rest assured, there's always a happy ending. So thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to the reading. I'm going to give all of you a book. You all got one to take home and finish the story. Thank you all for being here and celebrating Ginger's birthday. Let's stick around. We'll have some afternoon tea and a couple of drinks. Cheers. Thank you. Now it was Charlie? I.E.